Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Oh, Tony, we forgot at the end of our show yesterday to plug a couple new shows from our new sort of sister site, SaturdayGlory.com. So want to let you know, if you were listening, a regular listener to the Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning podcast and like that morning show format, Garrett Seawright, who you may know from the post-game shows, he does a podcast called The Daily Huddle. So you're going to want to search for that on wherever you find this show, search for The Daily Huddle. That's kind of a more nationally focused daily show. He does a really nice job with it. I'm going to throw one of those in as a bonus show in one of these feeds at some point soon. I keep meaning to do that and haven't done it yet because it turns out we're churning out content on a pretty regular basis as well. But also the Calculated Risk podcast. Tyler and Kelly do a great job with that. I love that show. That is kind of like power ratings and a little bit more sports betting focused, but just really a really good analytical look at the sport right now. So the sport of college football on a sort of national level. So make sure you're checking out Calculated Risk and the Daily Huddle podcast wherever you find this show.
So, Tom, it is the Western Kentucky game preview show. It is Western Kentucky week, as it has been, in fact, all week. And if you look at what Western Kentucky has done this season, they've opened the season with a win over South Florida, 41-24. Then week 2, a 52-22 win over Houston Christian. And for those of you who are not familiar with Houston Christian, don't feel bad. I don't know how many people are, but they are like Ohio State by playing Western Kentucky is like 4 degrees away from playing an NAIA team, because Houston Christian plays a team that played Southwestern Assemblies of God University. You may know them as SAGU. So this is the level of the transitive properties, the transitive win possibilities here could be, or at least transitive losses. I don't know if Ohio State's going to claim a transitive win over Southwestern Assemblies of God University, but they have a trophy for the 70 national championship team.
That's exciting. The Houston, if you're wondering about Houston Christian and thing, I haven't heard of them before. They have, for most of history until very recently, gone by Houston Baptist. That is a school that is best known. I was just Googling quickly just to make sure I was right about that. It is, as usual, Tony, yes. But that is a school best known. Actually, the funny thing is, I think that's a school where Western Kentucky essentially imported like their offensive coordinator and like most of their skill talent a few years ago from Houston Baptist. That's also the stadium where their stadium is like right outside the fence for their stadium. There's a CVS. So if you want to go get some gummy bears and a very long receipt, you just walk right out of that gate and walk right back in. So those are the two things that Houston Baptist, now Houston Christian, are known for, other than losing to Western Kentucky earlier this season.
That makes me feel better, because I was like, why was Houston Baptist busy? And apparently, no, they just changed their name. And so there you go. But with this, there's 2 sides to this story that we should explore throughout the show. And that is, 1, Ohio State facing Western Kentucky's passing game, and 2, Ohio State's running game facing a Western Kentucky run defense that has not been good to this point. But let's start with the Western Kentucky offense, because that's going to tell the story of this game. And it starts with quarterback Austin Reed, who led the nation in passing yards last year, I believe, has thrown 5 or 6 touchdowns this year with no interceptions. But that lack of interceptions is a little bit suspect in terms of he throws them, especially against better teams. He'll throw 1, maybe 2, threw 2 against Auburn last year. And so I would expect Ohio State to get their hands on some footballs, as they've done. But this is going to be a completely stark contrast to anybody they have faced this year in terms of Ohio State's defense. So I'm interested to see how they go from running against defending an option team, quote unquote option team, against Indiana, then a run-oriented team of Youngstown State, to this, where they're gonna spread Ohio State east, west, north, south, throwing the ball all over the place. And then when you're thinking, oh gosh, I've got to defend this pass, they run a draw, or they run right up the middle and they pick up 13 yards on 3rd and 9. This is the kind of offense that Ohio State is going to have to deal with on Saturday.
What's interesting is this is an offense they're going to have to deal with on Saturday, and then they might not have to deal with again for most of the regular season. You're gonna see Notre Dame throw the ball again a week from now, but not in the same really kind of system. And this is closer to the air raid than anyone Ohio State's played in quite a while. Like the actual Mike Leach kind of air raid. This is not quite that, but it's sort of air raid adjacent. So yeah, it's going to be a team where they're going to spread you out. They're going to try and make you run sideline to sideline, tire your defensive line out, and then they throw, and then hit you with a little run. Like there's a reason that Mike Leach running backs average like 8-9 yards a carry. It's because it's sort of the inverse of the service academies where they're going to average 17 yards of completion or 20 yards of completion because they're going run, and then they throw and you're not expecting it. This is the inverse. They throw, and then when they run, you're not expecting it.
Yeah, and that's what we've seen that for years and years. And they'll throw to the backs, they'll throw out wide and use that as part of the running game. I'm still wondering if Malachi Corley, who was their top receiver, got injured in the USF game. Don't believe he played last week. I think it was ribs. And so I'm just scrolling, looking to see if there's an update on his status. And right now there isn't, but I'm sure Ohio State will expect him to play. He's a guy that plays in the slot and is just, very difficult to deal with. Last year, he put up 101 catches, 1,293 yards, 11 touchdowns. To give you an idea, they throw it around, and he is a focal point. Now they have other guys, including former Buckeye Blue Smith, LaChristian Blue Smith, who started out at Ohio State, then went to Cincinnati, then matriculated to Western Kentucky, and so he has actually 8 catches for 88 yards on the season. He'll be the tall one, so just keep an eye out for the tall guy. And they're going to use a bunch of weapons. You just look through there, and they've got like 6 or 7 guys with 5 catches or more so far. So while there is one guy to focus on, Austin Reed will spread the ball out all over the place in all directions.
Yeah, this is just going to be a team that's just sort of a pain in the butt. And I want you to prepare yourself. I do not want you to be angry and throwing remotes at the wall or throwing popcorn at the stadium or whatever you feel like throwing. Do not throw it. Ohio State is going to give up some first downs. They're going to give up some points. They're going to give up a bunch of completions. That's okay. That is not the end of the world. I would not look at this and say, well, Western Kentucky completed 30 passes and had 300 yards receiving or whatever. And this means that Ohio State is going to give up 60 completions for 600 yards against Notre Dame because they're a better team. You're going to give up some passing yardage. I think, to me, what I would be concerned about for Ohio State's defense is, are they giving up a bunch of yards after the catch? Or are they being sure tacklers in space? Are they getting hands on footballs and impacting the passing lanes? Are they getting their hands on footballs as defensive backs? We keep hearing about how they get hands on footballs in the defensive backfield. This is a week that, do you see 6 passes broken up this weekend, 8 passes broken up this weekend? You might. I mean, you're going to have a lot of opportunities. I think you got a decent chance of seeing Austin Reed throw 45 or 50 passes this week. So there are going to be opportunities for these defensive backs to make a play. And this is, I think, going to be a nice little stress test for them where you're really getting pressed a little bit. And the skill level talent is not what it's going to be next week at Notre Dame, but this is going to be a good little stress test for them to then, okay, you figure out what you need to work on, you figure out how you need to adjust coverages maybe before you have to do it for real on the road at Notre Dame in a week.
And they're gonna push it. They're gonna run tempo. They're gonna try to get as many snaps in as possible, as many plays in as possible. So that's something Ohio State hasn't seen either. So they've just been able to collect themselves after each play, get situated, get their eyes where they need to be, communicate, and do everything because they have, they'll have 25 seconds to get situated and to talk. Basically, they could huddle themselves if they wanted to in the first 2 games. Here, it's going to be so much faster. The communications are going to have to be spot on. It's going to have to be immediate. The coaches are going to have to be working faster as well. And so there's, as you said, it's a stress test mentally, physically, directionally, spatially, all of these things. And then it goes back to just relying on doing your job. And maybe that's a good thing, because against Youngstown or against Indiana, when they were so focused on doing their job because they were seeing something new, seeing something they weren't prepared for, hadn't prepared for, they were prepared for it, but they hadn't prepared for it with that triple option. They focused on what they do, just their job. Then when they see an opponent they're more familiar with in terms of the system, they lose leverage a couple of times because they're trying to do too much. Here again, now they're going to be so focused on not being the guy that screws up that you're going to be so focused on your own job and tackling in space and covering your guy and, handling your zone, that I wonder if this is an instance where they are able to stay fundamentally sound because they're more concerned about what they are supposed to do rather than being more worried about just making more plays. It's like, you don't need to worry about making more plays. Make your play, because this is an offense that can make you pay for it. And Youngstown State, that wasn't.
Right. The system on this for this team is one that if you're running the ball, you're going to have to hit a couple solid plays to pick up a first down. With this offense, you might just be able to, you throw one guy misses a tackle and boom, it's 14 yards, 15 yards, something like that. You've got to just be really sound against this team, because you have one bad play, boom, the chains move. That's keeping, I know we're not expecting them to milk the clock down to 1 second or anything like that, but if you're putting together an 8-10 play drive, if you're Western Kentucky, that is going to take 4 or 5 minutes off the clock, even if you're not really trying to milk it. So I think, they're going to have to really be focused on just doing, like you said, doing their jobs. Keep everything in front of you, keep contained, keep everything inside. That was something Tim Walton talked about on Wednesday night. You got to keep stuff inside. If you're the corners, don't lose leverage. Don't let guys get outside you. Keep the defensive line wants to spill it outside for the linebackers. The corners want to kind of push guys back inside, like you're a sheepdog. You're just kind of rounding them up, pushing them back inside, and then letting the cavalry ride in and take care of the rest.
I'm wondering what is a good performance from the Ohio State defensive ends. They have no sacks yet, and as Ryan Day and Jim Knowles have both said, this will be the game where we see the pass rush from the outside guys. Western Kentucky has not given up a sack yet. Everybody being those at Ohio State, expect the defensive ends to start producing in that way. But, you go back, and Jim Knowles said it on Tuesday that they're seeing more runs on third down than normal. So I went back and charted like all of the third and passing, which I would consider 3rd and 4 and more. The 3rd and 3 you could do whatever, but 3rd and 4, you're most likely that's passing down. But in the 25 instances where they've had a 3rd or 4th and 4 or more, teams have only thrown it 15 of the 25 times. 60% of the time, 40% of the time they're running in those instances. And when they are throwing, they're not picking up many of those first downs. I think they are 5 of 15 at this point, and 2 of those were the end of the game, the Youngstown game where the backups were in. So even though maybe the defensive ends aren't getting home, and sometimes they're dropping back on those third downs, which of those 25, they did it 2 or 3 times, where it's JT, Tui Molowau, and Jack Sawyer both dropping back, and you've got the linebacker, so you've got a zone blitz thing going in. Like, I don't know that they've been totally unleashed, but I'm also only looking at the third downs. That doesn't explain necessarily why you couldn't have a sack on first or second down, other than how focused are they on that right now, as opposed to just keeping stuff in front of you. They're obviously pass rushing on those downs, but are they doing it in a more careful way? Because we've also seen earlier in camp talking about how last year some guys would pass rush more for themselves than the team, and that those guys are gone. And so this is a more cohesive unit, and a more cohesive unit won't necessarily lead to more sacks, but it'll lead to fewer points.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the ultimate metric you're judging this defense by, is the number of points they allow, and so far through 2 games, that number is 10, which is pretty darn good. as far as the defensive line goes and the defensive ends, how many sacks they're going to get, I think that is kind of a tough game to predict that, because a lot of that is going to depend on what's the coverage like in the secondary. We talked earlier in the week about how this is, the secondary and the defensive front have to kind of work together. The coverage and the rush have to work together. If the coverage is in press, then maybe it makes it harder for Western Kentucky to get the ball out real quick. And then that gives the defensive ends a little more time to rush, because Western Kentucky is going to try and get the ball out of Austin Reed's hands as quickly as they can. Just a bunch of short stuff, crossers, bubble screens, all that kind of stuff where, if you get the ball out of the quarterback's hands in a second and a half, like, no one's going to get a sack. That is just, you're not going to get there. So you've got to have good enough coverage that, okay, you got to come off that first read, and then you got to look at something else. How successful are they at doing that? That's going to be really, really interesting to see. Because we have not, this is a team that certainly could play press. They have played they play press a bunch. I don't think anyone out there is going to scare Denzel Ward. So, Denzel Ward can be up at the line. There were times last week where there was a fourth, I think, and 4 or 5 play that I broke down with Ross on the morning show on Friday, and it was whoever was in the slot. I think it might have been Burke was in the slot, but he was playing off on like a 4th and 3, 4th and 4 kind of play, and then that's a real easy 3-yard out, boom, first down. You've got to be comfortable. I mean, putting someone a little closer to the line of scrimmage, press, make them make a play. If you do, that's when you maybe get them coming off, get Austin Reed coming off those receivers, give those defensive ends a little more time to get home.
Offensively for the Buckeyes, they're going to be facing a Western Kentucky defense that gave up 374 yards rushing to South Florida to open the season. Now, judging a defense or anybody by what they do in the first game is it's dangerous, but 374 yards rushing to South Florida seems like I can go ahead and make some generalizations based on that. And then you have Houston Christian going in and rushing for 160 last week, 4.7 yards per carry. So it would seem to me at this point that Ohio State will be able to run the ball. And watching them in that first game, watching South Florida and Western Kentucky in that first game, there were some wide lanes for the Bulls running backs to run through. So large, in fact, Tom, that actual Bulls could have run through them. The irony being, of course, Bulls don't need that much room to run through, but still, they were, as I'm watching this, and there are these giant lanes, I'm thinking, well, Travion Henderson would make this guy move and then make this guy miss, and he's gone. And Chip would just get that corner, or Mayan Williams would make that first man miss. And it seemed at times Western Kentucky plays with like 9 guys on defense. I think we've said that about Ohio State last year. This kind of feels like that. And I don't think it's necessarily because of anything, any blitzing or any aggression. It just seemed to be some guys missing defensively, and you spread them out a little bit, and then you attack the areas where you have the numbers advantage. And I think Ohio State has a really good chance for a big week on the ground.
And I think they want to have a big week on the ground. I mean, they're going to want to throw the ball with Kyle McCord, but I think they also want to show that they can be well-rounded this weekend, because you want Notre Dame to have to prepare for the run game. You don't want Notre Dame, they want to be multidimensional when they go to Notre Dame in a week. And you want Notre Dame to have to worry about the run game so that then that potentially opens some things up in the pass. I don't think they're going to be able to run the ball super well against Notre Dame, but if you put up 7 yards per carry against Western Kentucky, well, that's going to force Notre Dame to kind of pay some attention to that, and maybe allocate some more resources there, which then opens some things up in the pass game. But I am expecting a decent number of runs and a decent amount of production on the ground. This is a week where, we've talked in previous weeks about, there's nothing you can learn that would be bad, and I think, or nothing that you can learn except stuff that would be bad. There's nothing that they could do against Youngstown State that you would go, aha, it's all fixed, it's all great. But when stuff didn't work, it was like, oh boy, that might be a concern. If they don't run the ball well this week against Western Kentucky, I think that's like a big red flag the size of the flag they fly at the stadium. Like that's like an, oh boy, if you can't run against this team, if it's another, they were at like 4.6 yards per carry, something like that through the first 2 games. if they're at 4.8 yards per carry, 5 yards a carry against Western Kentucky, that's a problem. That is a problem. I'm expecting them to be better than that, and I'm expecting them to hit some big plays. But it's also, it's not just, you don't want, okay, they're at 4 yards per carry, and then Travion Henderson had 180-yarder, and then now it's 6. It has to be both explosiveness and consistency. I think you should see both. If you don't, that's maybe a little bit of a concern.
The focus for the offensive line this week has been violence and coming off the ball. And Clay Hall from WSYX asked Ryan Day during the Thursday lightning round if you can artificially motivate an offensive line to be meaner. And I think that's a good question in terms of, you can talk about it, but if they're not that, like, how do you make them that? And is it in them to be that? Some guys are just nice, that sort of thing. Some offensive linemen have maybe gotten to this point of their football life with just being big and agile, but at some point you need to be angry and physical and dominating. And they said that everyone can always be pushed to be better in every area, including this one, and the physicality. And said they're going to play fast and violent. They're pushing the guys to pushing the coaches to maximize the players, but it's not different than any other week. But at some point, it does become different because you need a more physical, a more violent offensive line. And the fact that they're even stressing that this week is proof that they're not getting what they want. So at least they're focusing on it. But I wrote it on Thursday that it is kind of a concern that you have to reiterate this to your offensive linemen. It seems like it should be more of this is a baseline. This is how this is how you play the game, as opposed to, hey, here's how we need to play the game. Like, that should already be set. That shouldn't be a thing that, hey, we need to do this. That should be a requirement.
Well, and this is a spot where you don't get to play for Ohio State and be a starter for Ohio State without having played at a pretty high level before. So I was kind of surprised by that, you would expect guys to be fast, strong, but, also physical enough to stand up at that level. You don't become a starting offensive lineman in the Big Ten without being, let's go back. We were talking about bowls earlier and bowls in China shops. Like, you don't get to be a Big Ten offensive lineman by being Ferdinand the Bull, who they want to take to a bullfight, and he just wants to lay there and eat flowers. Like that. That's not how this typically works. So, I don't know if that's, I don't get the sense that it's that these guys are like scared to hit someone. I think it might be more just sort of, you got some new guys up there. You've got a little bit of hesitancy to, am I in the right spot? The first week against Indiana, you had guys blocking the wrong people, and you have people question. You maybe get to the point where you're questioning yourself. Am I in the right spot? And then you're not attacking if you're questioning yourself. To me, that seems like that's more likely the cause there, and that's one of those things that you got to keep working. You got to keep grinding on the film. You've got to you got to get more reps, and you got to keep improving each week off of the film that you're putting out there.
And we saw that with the defense last year, where you're not quite sure. So you're not as physical, you're not as fast. And then as you get better and you get more confident, you know what you're doing. And you've got a redshirt freshman center, a new left tackle who is still figuring out this level, even though he's playing against a lower level. He's still figuring things out, playing at this level with these expectations at a new position. But you need to start seeing that physicality set in, because you've got one more week, and now then next week everything is for real and everything is ramped up, and it's going to be the biggest game, the biggest challenge individually, team wise, that these guys have. So you want to set a tone this week, and the only place you can really set a tone in football is up front, both sides of the ball. And if the Ohio State offensive line can't set a tone against Western Kentucky, good luck setting a tone against anybody else. That being said, Tom, I do expect them to run the ball, but what does it mean? It means that they did what they should do. And I think that would actually be a step up from what they've done the last 2 weeks, the first 2 weeks running the ball. They haven't done what they should do. If they at least elevate themselves to doing what they should do, that would be a good step towards what they may do next week. Have you set in your score prediction? I have not.
I have also not, but I kind of know where I'm sort of expecting. Buckeyes are like a 27.5-point favorite last time I looked. I'm not expecting them to cover that because I think Western Kentucky is going to put some points on the board. I'm going to say Ohio State 45, Western Kentucky 24. Something in that range is probably where I'll end up.
The number that I had in my head is one touchdown more for the Buckeyes than you. I had 52-24. I do think it would be kind of silly for Western Kentucky to kick a field goal in this one, but sometimes you have no choice, and just depending on down and distance and situation. So I like the 24 in there. I just, as we've said, expect to give up some points. That's what Western Kentucky does. They stress you. They throw the ball. I'm not convinced that Ohio State is situated yet at free safety. Josh Proctor is healthy. He will play. Ryan Day said he'll probably start. But we're going to learn a lot about, I think, Josh Proctor in this game, because this has never really been where he's been successful in terms of this kind of offense. It's been more of the Indiana kind of offense, and we saw him play well in that one. So this will be a new test entirely. Jihad Carter still learning to play on this defense at this level as well. We'll see what happens with Malik Hartford. But I expect the corners to be fine. I wonder what's going to happen with free safety. And Lathan Ransom has been really good in run support. He's going to be tested in the passing game as well. So this is going to be, I think we're going to learn some more about the pass defense in this one. And I think it'll apply further on down the road, because it's just going to be a stressful test for them. And how they respond will give us an idea of how they'll respond to other tests. There'll be different tests, but it'll give us a good idea of how they'll respond to other tests. Tom, do you have anything else?
I just wanted to kind of throw out there for people, just, a little context here. You go back to the 2014 season, you had a team where they opened against a team running the triple option, and they looked terrible against Navy, but won. Week 2, they lost at home to Virginia Tech. And then the fourth week of the season, they played a non-Power 5 team at home, team that liked to throw the ball around a lot, from south of Columbus. They played the Cincinnati Bearcats, and the score was 33-28 in the middle of the third quarter, after Cincinnati had passing touchdowns of 60, 19, 83, and 78 yards. And that team ended up winning the national championship. So maybe just like lay off the hemlock during the game on Saturday if they give up some touchdowns and they give up some yardage. Like, it is going to happen. It's okay. It's all right. As we tell our children, calm your bodies. It's okay. It will be fine. Relax. It is football season. You've been waiting for this all year. Why don't you try and relax and enjoy it? And, if they lose a game to Notre Dame, well, guess what? They have lost games early in seasons before, and it has turned out just fine. So, wait, it'll be fine. Just it'll be fine.
And the next game after that Cincinnati game was a 52-24 win over Maryland. That defense in 2014 gave up 35, 28, 24, 24, 37, 24, 27, 28, 35. Like, sometimes that's what it takes. And that was a new defense for Chris Ash. This is not a new defense for Ohio State, but you're still, it's an offensive game. So have fun dealing with it. So want to thank everybody for joining us. As always, you can find us at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Become a member. Check us out there. We would appreciate that. And of course, YouTube.com/BuckeyeHuddle, Facebook.com/BuckeyeHuddle. So thank you all. Enjoy the game, and we'll talk to you guys later.